Okay, so let's do it again. So welcome to the way we do it. I'm back at it, and again, I'm gonna try to get to you guys at least once a week. You see, it's kind of bright. A lot of my guests are a lot of people who are checking me out on East Coast, but as you can see, I'm still here in sunny California. I was talking to some relatives and some friends back east, and taking on some storms. I remember those days being on the East Coast. So wanted to start first, as you can kind of see from the theme BT, the early years, 1990 to 2002. So I know there's been a lot of curiosity about BET and what they're celebrating this year after the award show was really pushing it is BET being around for 45 years. So 1980 to 2025, 45 years of BET. And I picked the early years, 1990 to 2002, to talk to you about because those were the years I was at BET. So I can't tell you what happened before I got there, pretty much. Those 10 years, 1980, I was a junior in high school. So yeah, I had no idea about that. And 2002 on, I became independent, did some other things. So I can talk to you from afar. So, but I think it's important to kind of get, and I don't think you've ever gotten this from anyone else before, who, as I gone and walked through what I've done, I was at BT on the East Coast and I was at BT on the West Coast. I was at BT on the financial side and the creative side. So it gives me a very good, fortunate perspective that I think that's helpful for you because I can kind of see things from a bigger picture. So I'm excited about talking to you about that. Every once in a while when I run into people, I'll tell them little bits. And this is my Ali shirt. So I always think about like last week, I met a young person, a brother in Shreveport. Well, not last week, but in one of the last show, I wore his shirt because I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, doing some auditions for my horror movie. And I met this entrepreneur. He's down there on Texas Street, and I think I mentioned to you back then. If you're ever in Shreveport, I think I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Texas Street, that main street, downtown Shreveport, and he has a store, a retail store down there. Really cool guy, brother. Gave me the shirt for free. Was excited, and he was that true entrepreneur type. So I was trying to figure out a way to pass that forward because we got to start to circle the wagons and doing stuff more, a little bit more entrepreneurial, and just kind of get in that habit of yes, you can work for other people, but your side gig, your part-time gig should be a little more entrepreneurial. So eventually we get this habit in our community about being entrepreneurs and regulating our businesses, but you don't have to do it cold turkey. I never tell anybody just to quit their job to start. It's like there's so much to learn about being an entrepreneur that you can do when you're at home on the weekends, and separate the pressure of paying your bills and taking money out of your little business to start off. So that's always kind of a great way to do that. So let's jump into it. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through like a timeline and some experiences that I had. And if you subscribe and hit my website and ask some additional questions or some things that you might be missing in that scenario, I'll look at those. I read all my comments and stuff and my messages that I get. Some of you guys will send private messages, and I do that a lot, as well as I still upload my sketch comedy stuff because I think it's still funny. A lot of you really like the Lil Daryl stuff, man. Lil Daryl, um, Ricky Smiley, who played Lil Daryl, incredible talent, and I'm introducing you to some other people from the show as well, and some of the things I even forgot that I even did. And this week I uploaded a clip where I had a former New England Patriot and a Super Bowl winner, Riddick Parker, did the show. Rest in peace. He's no longer with us, but he did the show. And, we were starting to move. We were having all different types of talent. So we were moving from music talent to, in this case, I wanted to start to expand into professional athletes on the show as well, because it's a formula. It's a sketch show in its season two. If you go to the site and look at it, look at season two. That season two structure is what I want to bring back for season three of the way we do it, to bring it back to the market. 'Cause I think it's time to have some sketch comedy where the stand-up comedians are in control of the comedy. And you'll start to understand that you have writers and you have the comedians. I lean on more on comedians doing their own thing than writers telling stand-up comedians what to do. I just think it's funnier that way, and it's all about selecting the right stand-up comedians who know how to tell stories through characters and put them together and let them do their thing. I just think that's hilarious. That's my own bias, but I like that. It helps me too, is less producing and less controlling stand-up comedians, because man, they do their thing. So I'm starting to introduce some other ones. So check that one out. It's the last one I just uploaded. Riddick Parker, and he's going at it with Tommy Chung, who is "Don't worry about the money, player." That's his character. It's really funny. So that's the one. When I bring that back, that's what I want to do. I think Saturday Night Live is starting to take its natural progression, and no one's filling that void. I want to just bring that diversified urban humor from Black perspective, but it doesn't have to be Black. It's not totally Black. If you watch my show, it's pretty diverse, but the themes are just comes from our community. So I make no apologies for that, because at the end of the day, it's some funny stuff. So we get a chance, check that out, and then check out season two that's on the site. Those are full episodes, except all my episodes, and I know some of you kind of hit me with that. I have had to take the music piece, the component, which is typically at the end of the shows. I had to take those off because of music rights, right? So I don't have the rights to music. That's one thing the music industry, as we're looking at the Diddy trial now and what that means, and I think I'm gonna do a separate episode just on that void that's now happening in Black music, Black entertainment, because there's people that are no longer in that space, and then how do we fill that void so that the culture continues to move on, right? Because we can't have a culture that relies on just a few people. We've got to reinvent ourselves. And my big mission now is to train the younger people on how to do it the right way, and then let them do their thing, guide them, and then move on. Right. So that's a kind of a key thing that I want to be able to do. So with that, let me just walk you through. So I'll start with 1990, and this is like how this whole thing happened. Just a quick little backstory of me. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, a little town right outside of Philadelphia. I was actually born at Philadelphia Naval Hospital. My father was in the Army, sergeant major in the Army. So funny story, my father and my family, I have an older brother and sister. They lived in France, in Beaugency, France. My father was in the military, and when my mom was pregnant with me, we're going through this whole U.S. thing. She reminded me about that uh, a couple of days ago, when back in those days, De Gaulle was the president of France, and he said anyone born on French citizen, anyone born on French soil is French, right? And so my mom freaked out, because if nothing had changed, then I would have had to. They'd have came back to the States, which my father was. His next assignment was back in the States at Fort Lee, Virginia. Then at 18, I would have had to go back and serve in the military, in the French military, because I was a French citizen. So they subsequently changed that. Just like right now, folks, just things kind of settle. And what the rule is about the military. So any military wives anywhere around the world, if they're having a birth on outside the country, their children are U.S. citizens. right? So if you're on a Air Force base in Italy or you're in an Army base uh, in Venezuela and you know U.S. citizens, your child is a U.S. citizen. So this whole birth thing is you know I think just sometimes there's some interesting distractions. So that's just a real life experience for me. So my mom literally forced my dad to come back to the states early so that I was born um, in the states, and that's why I was born in the Philadelphia Naval Hospital, which unfortunately is no longer there. So it's sad. The place that you were born. Matter of fact, my high school doesn't exist anymore. So what's this telling me? Right. So my brother and sister, they were born in Washington, DC, so they were cool. But they kind of blame me for having to come back to America because my mom freaked out for having me. So that's how I became uh, East Coast kid. And my mom's from Virginia, my father's from South Carolina, and I was raised in Pennsylvania. So I'm very comfortable with that whole East Coast South. You know, no, I had plenty of enjoyment in the South. What I kind of mentioned to you before. So okay, so 1990. So how did we get there? Well, I went to University of Houston at first, right? When I first went to school, and I stayed at the University of Houston for 2 years. Then I transferred to Howard University in Washington, D.C. My major was business administration with a concentration in marketing. And at that time, I didn't want to leave DC. I was like, DC's got everything. Black professionals, jazz, I could go to homecoming, 2.5 hours back, to home, just right there on the seaboard. In my mind at that time, mind you now, I live in California, but in my mind back in those times, I could only see myself living in Washington, D.C., probably as far up as Connecticut. That little corridor is where I saw the world that I was going to live in. And uh, my brother actually introduced me to a bigger world than that. But that was the kind of pattern. And at that time, you couldn't told me I'd have been living in California. So I say that to say to you guys, man, just live your life, make good decisions, take chances where you're young. Be curious about things. You just never know how things are going to work out, right? So jumpstart to BT. So at the time, I graduated from Howard, stayed in the Washington D.C. area. Finally got like a really cool, stable job after going, running around doing all kind of little jobs, but staying in the area with Xerox Corporation. So Xerox back in those days, Xerox and IBM were like the two big companies that if you're kind of going in that corporate world, was two places that you would aspire to, because in their day, the machines, that's so probably more like what IT is now. So that's where I landed at Xerox. And at that time, Xerox was, as far as a corporate environment, it was one of the best corporate environments. So they say, Black Enterprise would say it, for Black professionals. So it had a reputation for acknowledging their Black professionals and then elevating them. And then we're having all this stuff about DI. We wouldn't even have to dealt with DI if people just would see people's talent as they are, open the doors, look through, and then when they see talent, then support that talent. And when you don't do that, then that's when we get to the scenario we do here, and then that's why you have to have these extra things. If everything was fair and square from the beginning, we wouldn't have all these issues, right? So someone was in there cheating the system, right? And every once in a while, you can kind of see where if you just let things play itself out, talent rises. And so for Black people in the music world and in the sports world, because the judgment was on what you did, you see a lot more of us in there, right? In other industries, not so much, right? Because people throw a couple of other little things in there as well. So I'm at Xerox at the time. A friend of mine who was at Howard, when I was at Howard, had gone to BET. I had no idea about cable. And remember, this is where you had broadcast television at first, and then cable television was like the new television. For young people, that's sort of like what streaming is to the cable people. So it's like a piggyback. So it was all broadcast, and then this thing called cable came around and broadcast, and people are like, oh, what's this cable stuff? Blah, 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 blah. You got to wire stuff and all this crazy stuff. And then that same conversation that now that the cable's here, it's talking about the streaming people. It's like, oh, what's all about the streaming? So it's just a natural progression. Think about music, vinyl records, 8 tracks, cassettes, CDs, to now just downloads, right? So as technology starts to move, we start to adjust. And the same thing happens in film and television, right? So this thing, because I had to kind of give you that sense of like in the 90s. Now, BT started in 1980, which is like crazy, right? So, but for me, I had no concept. I'm growing up in Pennsylvania. Scott family football. That's what I played in high school, played football. Had no recognition. You know, my father was in the military at the time. He passed when I was 11. So my mom went back to school. She became a school teacher. And so Pennsylvania, just in Philadelphia, is traditional, you know, it's a blue collar and working. So, you know, banking and finance and accounting and you know, plumbing and cutting grass. I mean, just basic occupations. I had a movie theater in my hometown of Yaden, Pennsylvania, but I didn't see movies as a career. I just saw movies as somewhere to go. And I remember I was telling you guys last week about how to create the perfect date. You know, back in the days, like go to the movies, miniature golf or putt is what they call, and then find a real cool spot to eat. And now you got nice little trifecta for dating someone that you cared about. So yeah, so small town. Had no idea. I never saw it as a career. Even when I got to Howard, never saw that as a career. You know, I knew I wanted to be in business, right? So that's why I was degreeing in Bachelor of Business Administration, same degree that I was pursuing when I was at the University of Houston. When I totally left to go to Houston from Pennsylvania, I kept that major because I knew it was going to be in business, and I knew it was going to be marketing. I just didn't really enjoy accounting and finance that hard, but I like marketing because it felt just a little bit more on the personality side of the game, and you know, making ads and describing stuff and shooting stuff. I thought that was kind of cool, but never thought of that shooting ads and advertising and creating products as a film and TV thing. And I think for me back in those days, if there was someone in my family or extended family that was in that profession of film and TV, I probably have a different perspective. So I think sometimes you guys might hear a lot of that where people get into something because of the environments. And that's important. That's why if you start that way by expanding and doing different things, you'll get exposed to different things. So don't just take where you live, what zip code you live in, and what your people are doing, then as to dictate what your career is. Because think about it. I'm in California now, right? Back then, I thought I was going to be living from Washington, D.C. to maybe as far as Connecticut, that little corridor. Well, with exposure to different things change your perspective, which is fine. You know, so don't worry about things that you can't worry about. Stay in a moment, but just be curious about when you're doing it. So, all right, anyway, so friend of mine is at Howard, goes to BT. I just started at Xerox, and they have like a great marketing program, right? And so my friend, now I'm not mentioning people's names right now because and maybe in some further episodes, I got to call them up and ask them if I could use their names because I won't put people on blast. So I kind of try to use titles and stuff like that. But that's why you're like, why he's not mentioning any names? Because I just want to make sure they're comfortable with me mentioning names, right? Because that's kind of respect thing. Because it's not like it's not true, but you just want to double check. And then even you guys, when you start doing stuff in the social space or you're doing live podcasts and stuff like that, you just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that, right? So it's not going to change the story. But a friend of mine with Howard he went over to BT, and just like any small companies, they were growing kind of fast. So there was this openness to hiring people. right? They were growing fast. So he called me and said, "Hey, Andre, got there's this company called BT. They're a cable. It's a black cable station. They're looking for an internal auditor." Now, when I went to Xerox, I was working in their copier division, and I was tracking copiers that were being shipped to the Navy Department. Now I'm in DC though. My territory that I was supporting these sales reps were down um, in Virginia, Newport News down there where the ships, where they would have to put, literally copying machines on these ships and on these submarines. But can you imagine? So a ship comes in, a Navy ship comes in, it might stay out in the ocean for like 6 months. So it comes in, the refuel, and everything it's got to have, it's got to get there, and they put it on, and it's got to go away. So you'd have these like huge orders, like nothing, and then a huge order because a ship has come in and say, hey, they need 50 copying machines, right? Because these are like little cities. So I would have to track and monitor those machines, how much, the little accessories on the machines. Did they get the right ones? How much supplies they get? And I had to track. The salespeople sold it to the government, but then I had to track, make sure it shipped to them, make sure it got on board, that kind of thing. So even though I was, my degree was in marketing, I knew Xerox was a marketing company, but the job that I was hired for was what they call a order administrator or a customer business rep. So you're saying, well, what's that got to do with marketing? Well, a lot of times for you guys, sometimes you just need to get in the house before you said, I really just only want to be in the living room. So any kind of a company that you're interested in. So I knew I wanted to eventually be on the marketing side of Xerox, but I got in wherever I could get into the business. And then I just thought, eventually hard work, networking from the inside, I could get from where I was to somewhere else. So as people promote you or say, hey, Andre, what is your career advancement? What you want to do? Then I could build from the inside. So that's why I didn't want to do sales. I was never good with sales. I didn't like to sell things at the time. So, but I wanted to get in, I wanted to do marketing, the advertising, and they weren't just hiring people off the street to do marketing. Normally you got into sales. So I went into like this administration side of our marketing business to get inside and then hopefully use those talents to move forward. So I'm in Xerox, great company. It's in DC. Just started the program. Back in those days, they would train you like the first, in your probationary period, first 30 to 90 days inside. They actually had training classes because there was, back in those days, each corporation had their own way of doing business, and they would hire you, pay to train you, and then you would transition into like full-time doing it. Unfortunately, they don't really do that a lot now. So I'm there. So it's a great name to be on your resume. Now, when I did get to Xerox, they would call people Xeroids. So like people are like really into it. A lot of Black people like were really into it. It's like they struck gold. I just wasn't that person that saw it as, I saw it was a good company, but I didn't see it like I wanted to stay there forever. Right. I just didn't have that kind of, I had strategies and careers, but I just never, just never thought that was the end game. Like I struck it rich, I'm gonna stay here 30 years and retire. I just never had that. Right. It wasn't too short term, but I just never had that kind of thing. It was a great job, but I didn't know what it was, but I just knew there was something else out there. But I wanted to learn from good companies. That's the one thing I learned about in marketing from my degree is get around good brands and know what they're doing so that you can have good skills when you move up, right? So you always want to go to, get a job if you got to pay your bills. That's one thing. But then if you're starting to focus on your career, go to businesses, even if they might even pay you less, but if they're training you to do it the right way, if you eventually want to have your own business, you want your own restaurant, work in a restaurant, work in a good restaurant. You want your own fast food chain, work in a fast food chain. If you want to own your own washateria, which I always thought was cool, washers and dryers, in a little mini lot in your neighborhood. I thought that was a great entrepreneurial business, right? You just come, make sure it's clean, pull the change out, and boom and go. I've always thought That was a cool way to do entrepreneur because everybody got to wash their clothes, and a lot of people don't have washers and dryers at their house. But anyway, I got digress. I'm sorry. So my friend calls me up, and I say no, I don't want to go. Now, mind you, I have no clue. All I knew was I just started at Xerox. I don't know anything, so I want to get some marketing skills with this on my resume because back then it's like you want to have a good resume. So I said no, right? And he eventually hit me back up again, and about 2 years later, after 2 years at Xerox, I learned what I needed to learn. I saw that I really didn't want to do marketing at Xerox because there were so many people in front of you that were just not leaving. They were just there for years and years and years. I was like, I could see the glass ceiling, but it was a glass ceiling that I saw that wasn't really a racial glass ceiling. It's just what everybody wanted to stay. And I'm like, we're the young ones on the totem pole, the last hired, first fired. I don't know if you ever heard of that. So I'm like, oh man, I'm not staying here like 12 years to finally move up to be a manager. I was like, no, that's not it. So I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew, okay, I was just in that mindset. I don't know if you ever get in that mindset where, you need to do something new. I wasn't crazy rational where I'm like, I just quit and, do that kind of thing. But I know when I'm kind of tuned out, I'm still doing my work, not telling a lot of people my business, but I'm just open, right? And so my boy calls me back again. He's like, we got a couple other positions. And I was like, yes. So I took the interview. So I graduated in 86. This is in 1990 where I did this. So pretty quick, right? 2 years, 4-year window, out of college, got to corporate America. So, when I look back at this, like that's pretty aggressive. But I didn't think of it at the time. It's just like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I don't mind doing the dirty work, but I was smart enough, strategic enough that certain companies, I'd rather do something in a lower branch of a certain company that's a good company than higher branch of something that's just, it's got good money, but no skills that are transferable. And I'm glad I did that because I think one of the reasons why I was attractive to BET at the time is, and my boss eventually told me that, who was the vice president of finance, was she was looking for Black people who had corporate experience so that when she hired people that they could bring that structure that they learned from successful companies into this smaller company that was growing really fast. When a company is growing really fast, they start, a lot of stuff doesn't get done right. And in the case of finance, what she was covering, bills need to be paid and, organization, so contracts, just a lot of stuff, right? So she wanted to organize that. So her goal with the internal auditor was to look to see how we could streamline BET's corporate business and its financial business so that it's very effective. The right systems were in place. And so I knew how to put systems in place because that's what I was doing at Xerox, tracking machines, knowing where things go, create the little databases to track things and make sure that they were going. Now so I had more order administration operations experience, even though in the back of my mind, I want to be a marketing person, but that's the experience I had. So I was excited. Their offices, just to give you a layout of Washington, D.C., BET's actual corporate headquarters was in Georgetown. Georgetown is a section of Washington, D.C. off of 31st Street. So for those of you who are from the area or familiar with it, so the corporate offices were in Georgetown. That's where Bob Johnson, the president, was. That's where the VP of finance, the VP of affiliate marketing, the corporate lawyer or VP of law, the VP of sales was in New York, and the VP of production was at the production facility in DC. So in Northeast DC, off the New York Avenue, there was the production facility. That's where all the stuff was shot. That's where, the video saw Rap City, all that stuff was in the production offices. And then the corporate offices were a separate building in Georgetown. And for the time that I was at BET on the East Coast, I was always in that building. Every once in a while, every once in a while, that I ever go over to the production people. I saw production through the documents that I had. So, them shooting it because it was so far. You leave Georgetown, you go home. So it was like two different worlds. So I'm all geeked and all excited about going into, and as a matter of fact, I wrote down my first day was April 1st, 1990. Ouch, I'm old, right? So I'm all excited. I'm an internal auditor, I tell people, but remember, cable still new. BET, only thing Black people really knew about entertainment was artists and the radio stations, right? Because that was the business of the time. There was no Black cable station. BET was the first one. There was no such thing as that, right? So you had local Black radio stations, and you had artists through record labels. So radio stations and record labels was the entertainment business of the time for Black people, and BET was that first television station, which is a whole different skill set. Radio people to this day have a different skill set. Music people or record labels, different skill set, and television has a different skill set, right? So crazy as this is, so I go by the VP of finance, a Black woman. So right from the beginning, BET was very diverse. The VP of affiliate marketing was a woman. Bob's legal counsel was a woman, and then his VP of sales was a brother. VP of affiliate marketing was a brother. VP of production was a brother. So very, very diverse and very gender balanced just from the start. It kind of reminded me of it. If you guys ever get a chance to check out Boomerang, if you've never seen it, the original Boomerang, when they go into the office, corporate office, but it was the culture, everybody's looking good. It was a great experience to be able to go into a building and you see yourself in all the positions, secretaries, the janitors, everybody looked like you. We have all had different functions. It was just kind of a cool thing because I've never really saw that before, right? So I'm in there. First day, my boss says, Andre, I got a problem. And I'm thinking like, oh no, the company doesn't have any money and I'm going to get fired, right? And she's like, no, I had to let go of our accounts payable manager. I know I hired you as an internal auditor, but I had to let go of my accounts payable. She never told me why. I had to let go of my accounts payable manager. And so I need you to be our accounts payable manager. So in my mind, I'm thinking, now remember, my degree was in business administration. I knew about accounting because we had to take a couple of classes, but my concentration was marketing. I had no idea what accounts payable manager was, just that title. I didn't even know what that was. I think she looked at my face and she saw that. And she said, well, let me ask you this. Do you have a checkbook? Now, this is scary, young people, because back in the day, you had to have, a checkbook, writing checks, right? I still write checks. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, how do you account for your checkbook? Like, how do you balance it? I said, to the penny. And the reason why I said to the penny was, remember, my father was in the military, sergeant major military. So discipline, know how much money you got all the time. So that was just part of just natural life. Live within your means, that was just part of just being raised to just live that way. And so even when I was on my own, I still did that. Still made sure I knew where every penny I had and just, figure it out. And then like owing people nothing. I came from a family like that. You don't be owing people nothing. If you can't afford something, you ain't supposed to have it, right? Until when you really, really need that thing, then okay, right? So I didn't, I'm thinking like, gosh, It's just part of home life. Not realizing that was one of the things that probably got me that job, right? So when I said, yeah, my checkbook is to the penny, she's like, well, that's all an accounts payable manager is. It's just, you're just doing that for the company. You're paying the bills, and I really need that. And something in my mind said, I need to say yes to this, right? Someone just said, I need to say yes, even though I had apprehension. And soon as she kind of said it, and just, I don't know if that's the ancestors or whatever. It wasn't cockiness because I didn't know what that was, but something just said to me to say yes. And so I said, yes, and I'll do it. And she took me over to Georgetown, the Georgetown corporate office. It's like a renovated home that's been gutted out on the inside, but now it looks like a corporate office on the inside. So you go in the first floor, there's a receptionist. You go up some steps to the second floor, and go up some more steps to the third floor. Third floor was reserved for Bob Johnson. That's where his office was. Then everybody else's, his office was in the back of the third floor. I think there's a couple of extra little offices for affiliate sales at the top. The second level was where a lot of the work happened. That's where the finance people were. And there was a couple of offices on the first floor and a conference room, right? So, and it just was like, it's like the coolest thing. And so every day you see him go all the way upstairs, and you parked. We had parking underground under our little building in Georgetown. So if you know anything about Georgetown, to have underground parking, this is Black people, underground parking in Georgetown in this cool spot. I had no perspective that this was unusual, because you just don't know until you go. So I knew I had to do that job. So she took me over to where all the bills were, and this is how you do it. There was an assistant. I had an assistant there. He was a former military guy, really cool guy. And that was my job. So when she left, I had no idea. And see, here's where networking helps. So I called all my friends at Howard that were in accounting, because I'm like, I don't know what this stuff is. And they said, okay, Andre, go to work the next morning, but go early. I think we started at 9. I don't know. I might be lying. But let's just say we started work at 9. I'd be there like at 7:30, 8 o'clock every day. And so I would go early, and then, and this is like regular landline phone. So I call them, and they're like, what's in front of you? And I told them what kind of machine it was. I couldn't take pictures of it. So told what kind of a machine it was, how it printed. My assistant was helpful as well, but he was more of a processor. So he never did the management level of this stuff. So he wasn't qualified to go up to that position. But he was qualified for what he did. So it had like a check writing machine. So you would input the data for the invoices, and then would crank out these checks in 3 copies. It would type out everything except for the signature. You could rip it off and then attach that to whatever documents, and then that check needed to then be signed. Now, and here's how that worked. So you needed an invoice to pay a bill. You needed a contract to pay a bill. You had to have some kind of backup. So I had to, now mind you, I have no idea about this stuff at the time, but that meant I needed anyone who had a contract with BET as the accounts payable manager. I had to read those contracts to see when they were being paid and how much, right? Some contracts, and this is everybody, I knew everybody's salaries, how much they were being paid, except for payroll. So the people that were on payroll at the company, that's just a big payroll service. So I didn't see that, or the executives. So I had no idea what their individual salaries were. Later on, when I became a budget director, I knew what the chunks of their salary was. So I knew what, like, there would be a VPs, how much they get overall, but I never was able to separate that out, right? Because they were being paid through a payroll system, which that information was solid. But everything else, anything that we needed to write a contract on, all talent. So any kind of talent, whether it's a Donnie Simpson or any talent that signs a contract, eventually D-Hell, Hughley, comedians, everybody was on a contract. I knew how much they were making. I knew how much we had to pay for all of our bills. So our transponder, that's the thing that we shot our stuff up to, any kind of contracts. I knew all that because I had to pay those bills. So I'm actually glad that I had that job because I got very good at reading contracts, understanding what was in the contract, and then most contracts is all about the money in the contracts, right? So how much you got to pay out, when you got to pay them out. So you got to create like little systems, like say contracts, you had to pay them quarterly, some kind of money. Like HBO, they got a big check, like quarterly, like a big check. So I had to make sure that check was generated. And here's the thing that I think will help everybody. And this is one of the things that I truly admire about Bob Johnson, about how he handled his money. Remember, he sold it for a couple $1 billion. And I think a lot of that is he knew how to manage the money. You ever hear about people getting ripped off and they lose all their money? Well, this one thing that I can share with you that will make sure you stay in your business is you sign all checks in your business. You sign all checks in your business. I can vouch for this because I actually had to do it. So, and then the second thing is make yourself available to sign all checks for your business. So I could have like 250 checks. Each of those checks had to have a document behind it verifying why I'm paying this bill. It could be the invoice, the purchase order plus the invoice, the contract plus the invoice. So it had to have something. The only ones that didn't have to have a backup to was like utilities, right? Like gas, electric, those things. And our FedEx service, because we're FedEx stuff crazy. So that, or UPS, when we got that invoice in, we knew we had to pay it because just the process of that. I had to have all of that set up, paperclip, the check on the front, that backup behind it. Oh, sun's starting to pop up. The backup behind it, put in a big satchel, and Bob would say to the VP, what day do you need me in the office? Now, he was in the office a lot, but what day did you need me to sign? And his commitment to us, and this is what I appreciate about him, because he always made this commitment. This is a part that I've never heard anyone really talk about when you start to manage your business. He said, what day do you need me to be there? I'll be there, and I'll sign every check that I need to sign on that day. Now, if you miss that day and he's not back, because what we tended to want to do is he signs one time for the month, right? Maybe twice in a month, but whatever that time was. And then, there's some emergencies, but very few emergencies happen because there shouldn't be no emergencies, right? Because everything is done in advance. He approves everything. You got your budgets. We got, we schedule things out. So, unless something like out of the blue happens, some event that you have to do, that's different because you can respond to stuff like that. So I had to have everything in that satchel. And this is me, and I had to take it. The VP didn't take it. The VP of Finance didn't take the satchel up. I had to take the satchel up. So I have a satchel of all these checks. I take them up to his office. I sit down. I put the satchel. He opens it up. He goes through every one and he signs them. Now, it's crazy. He might pull one and be like, I told them I didn't want to do this. And I didn't say anything because it's the boss, right? He'd put it to the side. Now, sometimes he'd put it to the side, sign them all, then put that one on the top. And then when I take that satchel back downstairs and I go to my boss, then I tell my boss, like, Mr. Johnson, he didn't sign this one. And I say why he didn't sign it. And then I try to get out there with the signed checks I have, to mail those out or however those needed to go out. A lot of times it was to be mailed out, right? So, or there's some courier system, whatever it is, I have these signed checks to go out, either put them in the mail or however they be picked up. Any ones that didn't get signed, she would take them, and then in their next staff meeting, or it might come back later in the week and it's signed because he got whatever he needed to get that one signed. right? So I was like, I didn't understand at the time, but what that makes a company do is companies work off of money. Everything inside of a company is bills got to be paid, right? So if you keep yourself in that system. Now, remember, he said whatever day, and he stayed. So if he had, let's just say there was 500 checks in there, and he needed to sign them. If he was out of the office, he would come back in. So, okay, Mr. Johnson's here. Take that on that satchel day, I had to be prepared. First thing, if he walked in first thing or he came in late, I had to have that satchel prepared to go upstairs and give it to him to sign. And he made that commitment. And I did that for 2 years, at least a year and a half. He made that commitment to sign every check. And I, to this day, and when I started my own business, I signed every check. I never gave that authority away. Now, eventually, he did when I left accounts payable and went on to other jobs that I had, because I went to budget manager was my next job. And then I became budget director. So then they hired some accounts payable people, but I cleaned it up because we were 30 days, 60 days. We were getting all kind of notices. So my job was to research, clean it up, find every bill that wasn't paid, get those documents. Because even if I had an old bill, I still had to, the people that would call you to try to get you to, they give your stuff to those delinquent payer people. I could never do that. I'd always have to find the original invoice, never write a check to a collecting service. I always had to find that original invoice from whoever sent it to the collecting service and then send it to them based on that invoice, or if something was missing, the contract was missing, or they never did one. I had to do that. I had a pile of research, and then I had a pile that I could get out. So eventually we got back to having our bills out on time, because we were, catching a lot of hell for being late and stuff. And it wasn't because they were Black. It was just because they were growing so fast. And remember, they lose an accounts payable manager, and then you got to get a new one, and bills are still coming in, and it wasn't streamlined. So we had tools where we had check requests, purchase orders, so that the different departments, we made them efficient on how to get money, as well too. So we streamlined a lot of that stuff. So that is a big lesson for all of us. And eventually, while I was there, he eventually, I think it was $2,500, he would allow his VPs, his executive VPs, could sign checks for no more than $2,500. So if it went past $2,500, because the volume got bigger, but he still tiered it so that he was still in that process. So I would say that to any entrepreneur, any executive, don't be too busy to not manage your money, and make the time to make sure you stay in that process. Because what that does is it forces your business to come back to you for things, right? They have to come to you. They can't just sneak around. That's when trouble starts to happen. We had an American Express card and for the company. And so he'd see that bill and he'd be like, whoa, who's this? And and it was broken down by every card holder. And he's like, why are you charging so much? Well, and it's amazing how much information you retain. So that's a little tidbit that I would definitely say you should keep as a strategy for your own success. Don't give away the power of signing your own checks. That's when people get in trouble. You give that authority to someone else. When I was a freelancer out here, and I had an agency, and they wanted me to send my check from the show that I was working on to them, for them to send it back to me. The difference, I was like, no, I will write a check to you for how much I owe you. It's my check. I will then sign, like say say that it was 10%. I'd write that 10% out of that check. So I'd get the check that I earned, and then I would write them. I'm not gonna have my agent pay me. I'm not gonna have my lawyer pay me. No, I pay them. They're out of my check. So I learned that working at BET with Bob Johnson. And that's how I was able and I still to this day, I don't give signature authority away on checks at all. So, no, because that's how you start to get in trouble. And I learned that of how he did it. And you can't say he had a little company, but two things he did. He made sure his staff, his executive staff, he had them commit to, okay, what day do I have to be in here? And this is specifically to his vice president of finance, who then told the other department heads, it's like, hey, whatever, walk through the process to get those things paid. You got to do your part when he comes in. So they couldn't do like a last minute stuff, right? They had to have their stuff in the system. And then the commitment was it was in the system properly. He'd come in and he'd sign every check. And I know he signed every check, except the ones he didn't like, because I was the one that actually did it. So this isn't, where'd that happen? No, you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. That was me. I signed. I had seen him sign them. And the power of him just recognizing, that's what threw me off. It's like he could just pull something out of it. He's like, what is this? And he'd be like, I said I didn't want to do this. Because it kind of snuck in there anyway. We just processed. As long as I had a contract, as long as I had the invoice, as long as I had the purchase order, and it was approved. But if there was somewhere in one of his meetings, he said, no, I don't want to do that, and it was already in the system, then, a lot of the execs, they kind of left it in there. And he's like, I don't want to pay this. And so, that banter went on. So that's how I started in 1990 as a budget, accounts payable manager. Then when I got it all up to speed, and it gave them a chance to really get an accounting person to do it. Because remember, I was more of a marketing person and logistical person. So when it was time to fill that job, she didn't really need an internal auditor anymore, because now we got sophisticated enough where the finance people were doing finance and budgeting. And so she's like, you know what? You're good with numbers. You're good at processing. So they spun me off to be the budget manager. So now my 100% job at the corporation was to manage the budget. So, and they had their whole process. So I knew the corporate budget, I knew all the individual budgets, and I was the one to then start to put a process together of the budget is how they approve their purchase orders so they can pay their money. So that's how that started. And then eventually doing that well, I became the budget director. And so I'm a young kid, a couple years out of college now, I'm a budget director. And so now I see everybody's budget. So the corporate budgets, all the departments, in production, they have budgets. The sales department had budgets. Affiliate marketing had budgets. And those budgets are detailed, travel, salaries. Now, I didn't know specific names of salaries, talent, because now remember, these are in big line items, but I knew what it cost to actually do a show. So in the production budget, every show had its own individual budget. So I knew what Rhapsody, how much it cost to actually do Rhapsody. Now, I never visited Rhapsody, but I knew what Rhapsody was on their line items. And then I became a budget director. So in that time, Bob Johnson decided to go public as a company. Now, he was a private company at that time. Then he decided to go public. And, we were hearing a lot, about his business model. And there's a lot of prominent Black people are like, you need to do this and you need to do that. Same as today. Right? We tend to still hear that kind of stuff. Right. So I was thinking, like, okay, well, if he goes public with his company, that means you could buy shares in the company. Right. So that means an individual can buy shares in your company. So if you want to have a position, you want to have a voice in that company, you buy those shares. Now you're a shareholder. And if you buy so many shares, you go to shareholders meetings, and the shareholders are like your new bosses, right? Because they've invested in this business with their money, and now you got to speak to them. So I was like, okay, this is a cool thing now for Black people who want to be a part of a media company, because this wasn't happening with radio and this wasn't happening with the record labels. So first Black television network, across the country and the world, right, was now open for you owning. Now, luckily for me internally, I was able to get shares because he gave us shares. And then the reason why I'm telling you this story is I saw the list of the entities that actually bought shares. And the people that were doing, black people were doing all that talking, they weren't buying the shares. These were big institutional companies that bought the shares. Then that's when I realized talk is cheap. A lot of prominent black people are doing all this talking and all this quacking, but when it's time to write a check and say, hey, you can get shares in BT and now be a part of the owner, they didn't show up. So then that's when I realized, I'm like, okay, I see how this works. And remember, when you're a public company, you're responsible to your shareholders. So whoever those shareholders are who invested in you, and these are white institutions. And then, Bob went back private and then he sold it, right? So I say that to say, you have to be smart. You're going to hear a lot of people criticizing, but nobody wants to write a check. And the things that you do requires money. So, you want to do, I'm literally in that process now. So I'm doing, developing a television show and developing a film. Those who invest in it are my investors. And sadly, a lot of them don't look like me. And it is what it is, right? And so we want to step up our game. And that's why I'm like, start small, start to learn what entrepreneurship is, and then you get a little more comfortable with ownership and then investing and things like that. We're getting there. It's just taking a minute, right? But the Bob lesson taught me a lot about how that works and how you kind of have to stay true to whatever you need to do with the resources that you have. BT didn't have a lot of resources. The advertising industry did not give us a lot of money for our stuff. And so by default, they can keep you with a certain quality of product because they're not giving you the money you deserve to grow, right? There's a book, I think it's called the Billionaire Bet. I think it's called The Billionaire Bet. I think it's the only book. Let's see if I can still find it. The Bob that I would highly suggest you get, because there's some really good information in it. I think it's, let's see if this is, oh geez. Let me just put in Bob Johnson book. Get you that. Yes, it's called, and I'm going to Amazon here. It's called The $1 Billion Bet, Robert Johnson and the Inside Story of Black Entertainment Television. This is a hardcover book. I highly recommend you get it. Right? I don't think that no one else has done a book on him. I highly recommend you read it. And if it's not for you, your young people that are in college or in high school, let them read it. Let them do a book report on it. Right? Change the focus. Folks, there's all kind of stuff. I know we're engulfed with the P. Diddy trial, but how's that going to help you? Right? You're going to know in a couple of days what went down. And a lot of us, if you follow it, you know what time it is. So I'm not going to get into all of that. You got common sense, watch it, see what's going on. If you know people in the industry, they can tell you what's going on. And so the reason why we need to pay attention to it is because we can't let Black excellence fall out of grace because people aren't doing the right thing, right? So we got to keep people inspired. So buy this book for that your college student or your high school students, a little disenfranchised about the system and all that. Buy them, let them read this book and learn, right? Because this is how we build. So that you get now. and you'll find out a lot of these business things that are not on the surface that keep us back because we don't understand how advertising kind of operates. You hear Byron Allen talking about advertising, with his company, but that didn't start with him, right? So this has started back. I remember at BET when we started getting the information about MTV, which was sort of like the rival in the music video world, right? So they would do a show and you get like what's called a rating, right? You put a show out, it would get a certain, some kind of a rating number from an audience rating number. And the higher the number you get, then you would expect you'd get more money for the advertiser. And let's say MTV was, their ad spots were getting $7,000 an ad if they got like a 0.3 rating on their show, right? If we got a 0.3 rating at that same show, we didn't get $7,000. We might have got $3,500 because they didn't value that black eyeball. And they were blatant about it. So as a producer, I've got half of what an MTV producer has to do a show. And when you have half of something, then that means that's less money that you have to do things. And so they can keep you down because you're not, remember the goal of a producer is to get the rating. That's supposed to be the basket. That's the touchdown, right? So can you imagine you run for a touchdown and because you black, you only get 4 points for the touchdown. And if you white, you get 6 points for the touchdown in the game, in that same game. And you got to keep competing. You see how that, but you see how that doesn't work? If I get a 0.3 for my show and there's an ad spot and you get a 0.3 for your show and there's an ad spot and we're in the same world, we should get the same kind of ad prices. That's equality, right? For performance. So now it's on the performance, right? I get a number, you get a number, boom. I get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, boom. Same. You can't be like, no, or HBCUs, you play football, but your touchdowns are 4 points because you're historically black. You see how that doesn't make any sense? Well, that's what we got to start cleaning up in the business world, right? Or a lot of the film people would tell you that back in the day, they said that black people in movies didn't work well in the world, right? Outside the United States, like, people in the Netherlands wouldn't want to go see a black movie. Now, you come as a music artist, you play some jazz in the Netherlands, they'll come. But if you show yourself on a movie screen, they don't come, really? And then what slapped them in the face? Wakanda pops up. Uh-oh. Wakanda plays well in China. Wakanda plays well in Europe. Wakanda plays well in Africa. Uh-oh. Now what are we going to do? So, eventually it kind of gets there. But I say all that to say you just got to keep pushing. You got to keep pushing hard. But it's important to see where we came from and learn so that we don't have to go back. And so that's why I'm happy to share with you guys, at least the time that I was at BET, what it was about, the climate, what you could learn and what you could do. So, BET 1990. What happened? 1992. I decided. Remember, I got there in 1992 as a budget director. I decided to resign. Oh my God! So now I didn't get fired at BET. I resigned. They're like, this BET is like, DC, that's the place to be. And here's my little aquarium, Pennsylvania behind saying, no, I want to do something else. Right now, what I did tell you is when I was at Xerox, I was listening to Les Brown, some motivational tapes from Les Brown, because I knew I didn't want to do the corporate thing. And I started developing my own fragrance line when I was at Xerox. So when I went to BET, I was still doing that at night. Right. So that's my entrepreneur thing. Remember, BET, I'm still working for someone else. Not really my thing. Even though it was interesting, it was a different environment. I think that's what made it exciting for me. But I'm still developing my fragrance line at night, and I got it to a place where, and those creative juices of having your own line that kicked in, and so I got it to a place where I had to make a decision. And that just dominated my thoughts, being an entrepreneur, more than working at BT. But I knew that I couldn't do it in Washington, D.C. So if I was going to have any kind of legitimate chance of doing fragrance, because now I'm using my marketing degree from Howard. And, so remember, I really wasn't using my marketing degree at Xerox. I really wasn't using my marketing degree at BT, right? So I was using that operational financial skill set. So that entrepreneurial spirit was still kind of sitting out there, not having attention. And as you know, the thing that you really want to do, if it's not getting attention, it's just going to start to, do something to you, right? It throws you off a little bit. So launching my own fragrance was the entrepreneurial thing that just kept my blood going, right? So at night, I could control my own destiny. So I had a couple of options. I could go to New York, I could go to Paris, France, or I could go to California. Those are the options in fragrance. If I went to New York with a fragrance line, because they don't know who I am, and how New York is, it's all about pedigree. It's like, who are you to have a fragrance? And I definitely didn't look like a fragrance designer. I knew I wasn't going to get a lot of love in New York City, because I was just coming up a little shade too dark to be a fragrance designer in New York City. France, that was just a little bit too much of a leap. I mean, leaving the country, going all the way over there, that was too much of a leap. So California was a good option for me. My brother lived in California at that time. Back in the day, I saw a similar story come out with Giorgio. His name was Fred Hammond. He owned a retail store on Rodeo Drive. That's the high-end retail store on Rodeo Drive called Giorgio. And he launched a fragrance, and it blew up. It was like one of the first American fragrances, not from a fragrance person, not from someone in the industry, that blew up. It was called Giorgio Beverly Hills. And I read that book. I don't know where I did with that book. I did with that book. Oh, here it is. Is it? Yes. See, I keep everything. So this was the Giorgio story, Wreaking Havoc. Good book. And I read that about how he launched it, how people were laughing at him because they're like, well, you're just a retailer. What do you know about fragrance? And he's like, well, I have customers and I got a good nose. So he launched that. That kept me motivated. And it gave me to the point where I would start to save up some money, about 3 months of bills, because they say, always save money. The old day, and back in the days, like you never leave a job until you have a job. But I'm like, I'm on the East Coast. I need to be on the West Coast. I'm leaving BT Cable to go where? There's no such thing as like BT Cable on the West Coast. And, even though they had a facility out there, they weren't going to just transfer me to Burbank so I could just fulfill my dream, right? So I resigned on good terms. Resigned from the business, and then took a journey, made it a trip. I drove from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta to Houston. I stopped in Houston because, went to the University of Houston, had some friends down there, hung out there, and then drove from Houston to El Paso and El Paso to California. That's how I got to California. My brother lived in at that time in Bellflower, California. And he said, hey, man, I got a couch. So I figured, well, I'll take 2 weeks to, as an adventure to get out there. Because by the time I get out there, I'm just going to find part-time work and just continue to develop my fragrance. Right. So not knowing, resigned from this company, going out to DC. Going out to California. When I got to California, I did know about the office that they had in Burbank. And so I called up there just as a general inquiry because, if you kind of know people, they might know where jobs are and stuff. So I just called just for that in mind, not to do anything other than that, because there's, at least other than my brother, that's the only people that I kind of knew that I knew could, say, hey, because I'm looking for any kind of part-time job, right? Because now it's about just getting a job to pay bills, because I knew what my career was going to be. I'm a fragrance designer now, even though it's in my mind, not in anybody's stores yet, But in my mind, I am. That's that whole Les Brown motivational type thing. You got to understand it and get the Les Brown. I think he's on YouTube. I constantly say that thing in every episode, every podcast I say, he was a great motivational speaker. Really got me, one of the only ones that got me up and actually doing something, because he was really big on just do what you can, where you are, what you got. That just hit home for me, right? So I'm in California. What I didn't know at the time, that a couple of key people in finance were let go. And I remember I left at the budget director. So by the time I got I remember when there's no cell phones back in these days. So by the time I got to California and I called to the Burbank office, the Burbank people, because there was an administration people up there, just had mentioned back to my friends who were back at DC that were in finance that I was out there. Right? Say, oh, Andre's out here, because I just called in, so they got my number. And so they tracked me down, the VP of production. Now, what I didn't know is they had let go of the couple of people in the finance, and no one had a good understanding of the budget. And the VP of production, he really needed someone to manage a budget, right? Because the other corporate people, they could kind of do their own thing, but he was in control of all of the shows. So, we existed because of his budget. The production, VP of production, is all about the shows, right? So back in the day, the Korean Rhythms, the Donnie Simpsons, all the Rap Cities, he's doing all the shows. So he's got to have someone, he's got to know how he's spending his money and stuff. So he tracked me down at the office. I went into that office to take a phone call, and he asked me if I would, and then, kind of told me what happened. He said a couple of people in the finance department were let go, and, and he was calling because he was worried about his stuff first. He wasn't calling for me to manage the other, affiliate marketing, sales, all those people budget. He was like, yo, I need someone to manage mine. And so I said, he asked me to come back to DC to do this, work on business affairs for him. And I said, no. Oh my God. This is the only things that you, and I didn't say no in like a bitter way, but I'm like, I told him, hey, I'm out here launching my fragrance. I just can't, that this is what I came to California to do. And then he thought about it for a second. He said, well, what if you were to do some stuff for me at the Burbank office? He said, I got 2 shows at the Burbank office. What if you just freelance for me there? And I said, well, I have a fragrance that I'm launching at night. He's like, that's not a conflict of interest. He's like, a fragrance and what we do is totally different. So I started back at Burbank as a freelancer. Freelancer is an independent contractor. So my job was to monitor his 2 shows in the Burbank office. His show's called Comic View, and he had another show called Between the Sexes. So on a freelance contract, I think it was like 3 months. And so I'm like, cool, because you need some money. And so, again, this story of just doing things that need to be done. So so I'm up there, and Between the Sexes was with Harold McCoo, and I forgot his co-host. But by the time I literally got there, and they used to have a show called with Tanya Hart that they did there, but that was done before I got to Burbank. So, and then when I got to Burbank, Between the Sexes was done, and that one didn't come back, but Comic View was staying around. So I really only focused on Comic View as the only show. So now this little small Burbank office for BET has a budget director, a corporate budget director that's focusing on that little office and one show. So I say that to share with you how involved I could get with that kind of energy, with just that little bit of stuff, where before I was doing it at DC. To me, this was cool. So I could really get into, and their Burbank office was probably like 16 people, maybe 16,000 square feet, right down but in a very strategic place though. It was in Burbank, California, which was right down if you live, we were on Olive Avenue. If you got out of our office and went left down the block and around the corner, that's Walt Disney Studios. And then if you went right, it was NBC was there. So we were in a small building, but we were in a great location to do what we do. Small facility, but we're in the right place to have one on the West Coast. So that was really cool. So I ended up, out of curiosity. Remember, this is, I'm kind of setting you up for this. When I was in DC, I never really went to the production facility because I had so much work at the corporate office. There was no, driving over there to watch a show in production, which typically would happen during the day anyway. But that just didn't make sense. They didn't do like night productions. It was like during their regular business hours into night, but it was during the regular business hours. So the corporate people just stayed away from the production people, right? Just the nature of what we did. But at Burbank, because it was such a small facility and it was just essentially one show, then I could really get a lot done monitoring and putting systems together to track that one little show. That, in my own curiosity, because they shot it away from, there was no facility near us. They shot Comic View in Gardena, which is sort of like a Black Hispanic community away from Hollywood, just like a working class area that had this casino in it, a little low budget, low end casino, but they had a room, they had a stage and a setup in the back that they weren't really using. And we got a great deal to shoot our comedy show there. What they loved about it is because it was a Black comedy show. So what would happen is when people would come to our comedy show, that they would then stay around, not all of them, but a lot of them would stay around and gamble in the casino. So, you had to be 21 to get on the casino. We loved it because security for the casino was security for us. It was Black comedy, that part of town. Black people were in that part of town, in Gardena as well. I think DL is from Gardena, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, so we were able to do something there. And so the office, because we're so small, a lot of the people that are in our office with the other freelancers did the show would have to leave the Burbank office to go down to work the show that night. So that little skeleton crew, a lot of those people that were in our office were a part of the show because we existed for that show. So it was normal for Burbank people to break out and go on location to shoot. And then, our boss would let you, come in a couple hours later after you shoot back to the office because we had administrative things to do as well. So I decided to go as well. Now, remember, they never had a corporate finance person. They only knew about us over the phone. And, we were always the bad people, checks were late, remember all that, the dysfunction from DC. So remember this poor little Burbank office, they had to get their checks from us as well. So that stuff could be lost in the mail. So they were going through all that. They knew that, they saw the effects of me cleaning it up. And now that person is now in their office. And now I'm curious about what they do. And these are producers and creative people who had administrative responsibilities as well. And if you know anything about creative producers, they don't really want to do that kind of stuff. They just want to do what they do. So here I am, naive, but curious. So I decided to go on location for the first time to actually make a connection between, like, I would see something like a gaffer. That's a type of a person. That's a skill, a below the line person. But that's a person. Now I was able to see what a gaffer does, what a utility person does, what's post-production, what the editor do, what the cameras, trucks, all of that stuff, all those little line items that I just saw as lines on a budget sheet. Now I'm seeing the people that actually do it, why they need tapes and why they need petty cash and why they need these things, to go on location, how the truck rolls up and connects behind the scene and puts it together, building of a set, why they need money to build a set, why they need it so much in advance, because I'm literally seeing these people taking wood and boom, 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 and in the next couple of hours, you see a set and then it's painted and just all of that. I saw it on props, like what's a prop, what's set dressing. Now I'm actually seeing a green room, why it's so important to have makeup artists. what a makeup artist actually does. You see the talent walk in, looking a certain way. You see a talent walking out, looking incredible. Now I know why you pay makeup artists what you pay them, right? Because remember, television is all about smoke and mirrors. It's what's being shown, not who you are in real life. It's just what's being presented. So in my curiosity, I wanted to go and see. And then when I was there, they had to deal with getting the people their money, and because the crew, they need to get paid and all that kind of stuff. So I felt that besides just doing the budget, because I knew how to get people paid, I knew that process. I still have my relationships with the people in finance, so they trusted me on the West Coast. So if I call and say, hey, such, I need a check for da-da-da, I'll send you the paperwork. They trusted me. The production people, there's a little adversary thing there, because different departments, but I became the middle person. So they trusted me. So they're like, if Andre's asking for it, then I know he's not going to be taking and stealing and do something crazy. So I started to take on the role of, I didn't know what a line producer was. So I was taking on this role of a financial producer on the show, only because I knew that there was finance stuff that I knew how to do that could loosen them up so they could do what they needed to do, right? And so the executive producer of the show started eyeballing that. He's like, that's what I need, because now we can focus on doing the show. We have someone who understands what BET needs on the East Coast, what we need, and then this guy is actually coming on location. He's actually on his own time, because we're 9 to 5, but I'm not getting any more money from leaving Burbank, traveling 45 minutes to an hour to Gardena, staying there to midnight, 2, 3 in the morning. I'm not getting no more money than the same money I'm getting before, but I'm doing all that work. And I'm doing it because that was exciting to me, right? So I'm getting paid. It's like entertainment. You know what I mean? It's like I'm actually going to a show, a comedy show, where I have privileges. I mean, think about it. It's like I could watch the show from inside the truck where the producers and directors, they're calling the shots. I'm watching there. I could go backstage because I'm the finance person. I could sit in a little reserved areas if I wanted to. So I thought this was great. So I'm like, because of that, I felt like, because of the other people that were there busting their butt, the teammates that you have, I wanted to do my part. I felt like I could do something. And so I became, they joke and they called me, here's my little thing. See, I'm always pulling out stuff for you guys. The finance people and the production people, I don't know this, this is gonna be glare. But this is called the G Money Award. It says Comedy View on it. The G Money Award, it says Comedy View on it. I think you can see it kind of like that. So the crew, the staff started to realize that, I was able to make things efficient. So now they were getting paid on time. We had petty cash on location where I was in charge of the petty cash. So they needed money. And, if you know anything about petty cash, that's just the money that you have on set just in case of emergencies. But in order to replenish petty cash, you need to have receipts. So if I say, hey, we're short food, go to KFC and get a couple buckets of chicken, and it costs $89, and I give you $100 bill, then you got to give me back the receipt and the change, and then I could reconcile that and get more money. So I'm controlling the money. Eventually I got BT to pay. We didn't have a lot of money to pay our comics, but I figured, well, the money that we were paying, it was taking them 45 days to get that little check in the mail, because it was like net 30. And then, comics are all over the place. So you send it to the address of the comics' last address was, and you never know how that's going to work. So now at least I was, and they gave me signature authority. Like I would say, okay, for the comics, I'm just going to give it a, let's just say it costs $50,000 to pay all the comics. Corporate would send $50,000, and I was able to open up a bank account in California, in Burbank, so that I have a local check. Because I don't know, back in those days, if you had an out-of-state check, sometimes they might not, cash it, charge you crazy fees. But if you had an in-state check, that makes a big difference. So because finance in DC trusted me, because I'm one of theirs, I was able to open up a bank account for it, and then the way to just make sure that they were comfortable with it. Then I only asked for, I showed them what all the contracts for the comedians, how much that total was, and they only sent me that amount of money, so that when I broke it down into individual checks, but it was still coming out of that pot. So there was some comfortability there. And so what happened is once they did their performance, they would come back to me in my little office. It's kind of quiet, low key. You can't tell people where the money stuff is. And I would make sure I have all their paperwork, and then I would sign a check, and they would walk out with their check. So it went from 45 days to whatever address to them walking out in their hand their check. Now, even though they weren't big checks, but it was in their hand, and the money that we had for them, because I couldn't control, the budget for it. But what they did have, I made it as efficient as possible. And the funny thing about it is when I get back to the office the next day, I check cashing people would call. They would call my office to verify, say, hey, such coming. Is that does us in somebody's check cash in Hollywood, and they got this check from BET. Is this real? And I would verify it. So it was pretty funny, because a lot of companies they would that next day, because they're in town, they're doing other stuff, they would cash that check, use that as their money while they're in town. So they might do some club sets, but then that was kind of like they could cash that check and put that money in a pocket, and that was a California pocket money. So that's how I started to do something that I thought was important. And then eventually, my boss that was in Burbank let the VP of production know we need to keep this guy, and then they hired me back on. So I was freelancing. I just did that. I ain't charged no more for that, but I just knew that was needed. And it made me feel good because I could do something that be a part of the process to help. And sometimes that's what you got to do, folks. Sometimes it's when you feel a void for something that needs to be done, it makes you valuable. I would say this when I was teaching students. I said, if your boss gives you the keys to lock up at night and turn alarms and all that off, guess who they're not firing first? They're not firing the strategic people that have involved themselves in the business, right? And that's just like extra stuff that no one will. I don't want to do that, man. I'm getting out of here. That one got the little codes, sets all the stuff down. If they got to let go 2 people, they're not letting that person go. Because that boss is like, if I let that person go, then I got to shut things down. Doesn't make sense. Always find something that's needed to be done and do it. You'll be surprised how that, and even if that doesn't do specifically, the reason why I'm adjusting, because I do this every week, don't I? My little sun, but I like the sun coming in, so that's why I'll just move around. You just see me a little shiny. Ooh, see, can I do this? I love about YouTube, we can play around. Oh, that's too bright. Can I move? One of these days, you just do something real quick. Maybe I'm gonna do I'm gonna put a little bear, because the sun is like right there. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna do this for a second. No, I'm not doing that. Shoot. Let's see. We got time. Just talking about Comic View and. Ooh. No, I guess I do need to do something like that. Put that. Let's see if that might. Woo. I'm gonna figure this out. Uh-oh. Maybe I go this way. All right, that's good enough. That's good enough. All right. So fill a void. Fill a void. And there's going to be value in filling that void. So that's how it works. So our first host was DL Hughley. So, I looked contracts. I knew what that contract was because I had to pay that contract. Now, this case, I had to, because I'm in Burbank, I had to do a check request for his contract to finance, but I knew how to put the paperwork together, how to send it. So that was efficient as possible. I was generating the contracts that we needed for Comic View out here. So initially, my production people, they would pull the pieces that they needed to do. They would find the vendors that we needed, and I'd make sure that stuff was proper and checked and send that to DC so that we could get those contracts back. And then I put together, a schedule to get that paid. So that's how I started now. So I'm moving from corporate finance to what we would consider production finance in Burbank. And then we did other things from that office. We did St. Lucia Jazz Festival. We did a Johnny Gill concert in Chicago. Because we're a small office and we didn't have a lot of staff, we would subcontract all of our staff. So we were a very efficient group. So when we put a budget together, that budget that was put together was for that project. And then when that project went away, that budget went away, right? And then we went back to our normal, just our administrative offices. Our main show every season was Comic View, but then we would pick up specials when we weren't doing Comic View. So we did this thing called Sprite Night, which was a pre-Soul Train night in LA. Soul Train would have Saturday. They were sponsored by Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola wanted to introduce the young people to their Sprite brand. So we had a Friday event. And if you know anything about California, when people came in for the Soul Train Awards, they would come in a day early, to get rest. So that Friday before the Saturday event, people were coming in town. We couldn't touch any of the talent that was on Coca-Cola's night, which was last year's hottest artist. Because remember, it takes a year to remember, award show, they got to do it, and then you recognize them a year later. And so our talent for Sprite Night, which was crazy, but it really worked out well, was new talent. So this is hot talent in the year of them being hot. We would have them on Sprite Night, which on television, young people are going to look at the hot people that are hot now before the people that were hot the year before. So Don Cornelius was pissed off at us, right, for doing that. But it's like, oh, you told us not to touch Coca-Cola people, and we didn't. We did young people with Sprite. So those kind of events we were able to do out of the Burbank office. And as I was doing it, I was getting better and better at Comic View. And this is why you always want to kind of have some mentors when you can, is my boss, who was the director and creator of Comic View, I think saw in me that I was a little more creative. Now, remember, I'm still doing my little fragrance stuff at night, still playing, still doing that stuff, right? And in 1995, I launched my fragrance line, right? And so I was the first African-American fragrance designer that was exclusively in Nordstrom's. I had a men's fragrance called Rocks for Men, and I had that at the Nordstrom's in South Bay, and it was in South Bay, meaning South Bay in California. So I still was doing my creative thing. I never just stopped one for the other. So what I think started to happen is my creative juices at night start to flow into creativity in my BET experience, because I don't think you can separate the two. I was trying to departmentalize stuff, right? I'll do my BET stuff during the day, fragrance stuff at night. But I think once you trigger that creative thing in you, I think then it then gets triggered, and you can't just hold it. And so in the production meetings, I started to have different types of suggestions when it was asked. And I think my boss started to see that as that I started as a financial producer, but I think he saw that I had a creative side as well. And so that put me in a unique position because I could produce stuff on budget because I was very good with numbers, but had a creative side. And then I think that those two things together, I think he saw that in me to the degree that eventually I got my chance to be the showrunner of Comic View. And what that means is you're the executive producer who's responsible for everything going on. My first season as showrunner of Comic View was the season we had a white comic, one Gary Owen. I was like, oh man, this is the first time I get a shot. I get the controversy one. But to set the record straight, Gary Owen was not a plant, because I had some well-known comics talking all this nonsense about a plant. Now, mind you, these comics weren't there. I was there. Gary Owen won that crowd, which he's very good with Black women with his humor. He won that crown. He won that night, and he became the host. That's as simple as it was. And I was there when the Black judges voted for him. Now, what do I look like if I nullify what the Black judges voted for? See, we don't do that. Black people, we don't do that. We might get huffy and puffy about something, but if Eminem is spitting them lyrics and he's getting it down, then we're like, damn, a white boy can drop, right? Larry Bird, basketball, putting it in, 6'9", barely jump, but he's a hooper. We were like, damn. Or like my little favorite, White Chocolate. You know, if you don't know who he is, a little brother, he's Little Pistol Pete. So we're very good at it. Now, you know, we'll give you a slant eye for a minute, but if you come through, you come through. And he did. He pulled it off. Recently, he has been acknowledging that part of his experience, because for a long time he wasn't really mentioning that part. And thank God I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, because I was like, yo, man, let's get this right. But he's been acknowledging that. And to be honest, that year is when our numbers increased, our rating numbers increased. I think it's because, number one, when we got a white host, white people start tuning in to see why there's this white host on this Black thing. And then they stayed because they enjoyed the humor. Because if you watch Comic View from the inception, there's sprinkled through it, it's been different races, right? If we think you're funny, right? So it's always had that. So this just gave an opportunity to grow Black comedy, because there's a certain style to Black comedy. That's how I see it. And the majority of people who do Black comedy the best are Black comedians. And because we kind of focused on up and coming talent, you got a chance to see something who might not have had all the connections to rise to the top, or the agents that would push them. Let me just give you a quick little story, because this is what I know, because as showrunner, this is what I had to do. So my boss was very astute about you having to watch all the comics, and you didn't pick comics based on their managers, agents, or none of that stuff. You picked them because they was funny, and you offered them to come out. And I think kind of a revolutionary way of how we did this. And I don't know, I've talked about this a couple of times, and people were kind of like, how did you get your talent? So this is how talent worked. So we would identify, for Comic View, for the comedians on the show, we would identify through promoters, the different promoters in different cities who had comedy nights. You know, there's a big one in the Bay Area. There's a big one in Houston. You know, there's these big Chicago's all, you know, there's just certain places that Black comedy just is huge. And so what we did with those clubs is we gave them the rights to use the Comic View name to promote the night. Okay. We didn't ask for nothing from the door, so that the fee from the door or liquor or food, didn't ask for any of that. All we asked for is two things. Number one, you could not charge the comics from performing on Comic View audition night, right? You couldn't charge the comic, and you had to send us, back in those days, a clean VHS tape, audio and video, so we could hear them. So if there was a Chicago comedy night, that Chicago club could be like, hey, Wednesday night, we're doing Comic View. They could promote you. They could put the Comic View name on the marquee. They could do everything with it. We didn't charge none of that. Didn't ask for anything at the door. Didn't ask for no food or liquor, which is where comedy clubs make their money, on the door, food and liquor. And we always said was you couldn't charge the comic for participating. And then we have people out there just to make sure that was right. And you had to send us. So they all had to sign a contract. You had to send us a clean audio video of the performance. And then we kind of told the in general, there's certain things we didn't really want to do, no N-word, no cussing and that kind of stuff, right? So when those tapes came in, I had to watch every tape. Now, typically what you do is you have producers, and I think we had like three or four producers that would, you would delegate the producers to do it, and then they would give their recommendations. And that's what I was doing, because that was that's what I thought how you did it, right? So I went to my boss, and I gave the recommended tapes, because what they would do is on the VH tape they would cut the ones that we wanted so that you have the ones you want to see. And then he asked me, he said, Andre, did you look at all the tapes? I was like, no, I gave them to the producers, and they gave me like sort of like their picks. And he's like, no, you need to look at all of them. And I was like, why? He's like, because everybody has a bias, and it's not a negative thing for a producer, but certain kind of humor. People like a certain kind of humor, right? And so they're going to use that bias in their selections. And you never know, because our producers were a little bit younger, and you never know what kind of influences they might have. They might be from Chicago, so they're going to, and at the Chicago auditions, you don't have to be from Chicago. Someone from Tennessee could have came to that club that night, but urban comedy's got its different little styles in different parts of. Well, that sounded like serious over there today. This is worse than we had before. I'm definitely going to have to do something with this one. It's my little thingy. Maybe I'll do it late at night. No, because then y'all be too tired. So anyway, I was like, that kind of made sense. He's like, no, you need to look at every tape, every one. Fam, I had tapes at the office. I had tapes at my house, because, you got a timeline for doing this. I had to look at every tape. And I'm glad that he taught me that, because when we got back to me, it's like, well, what about such and such? And they're like, oh, and then what I would do is then we'd have a group meeting where everybody was in the room, so that, because again, and this is something that you got to produce and tell people, everybody's not going to like everybody. Everybody has a different kind of humor. So our job, remember, we're showcasing. We're a national network, and we're showcasing up and coming talent. And so you need to have, you got the storyteller types, you got the ones that have a very hard draw. You got some, you got some more, you got some from like Jackson and Memphis and Houston. Their style's gonna be a little different than Oakland and Chicago. But remember, you're entertaining a broad audience of Black comedy. And so, I think about, Monique was on there and Cat Williams was on there. He had a whole he had a whole group of people with different kind of styles that weren't necessarily able to come to Hollywood, because back in those days, the Hollywood clubs, if you got to Hollywood, that was a different circuit. And we were kind of getting you Benji Brown from Chocolate. I mean, it was just and I hate to but I had to give you a couple of names, but just tons. Jamario, just a ton of funny. All my cast I got for the way we do it, I got from internally from Comedy View. So we had a wealth of people. But to say all that was to say that I was able to then be able to show run. Didn't know how valuable that skill was until afterwards. That I was able to be a line producer. I knew full budgets of a total show. My friends in Hollywood who are Black, they're not getting access to that kind of information that like I was getting access to. The totality. A lot of them were getting their talent budgets, but they never saw the total thing. So as a corporate budget director, I was able to use all those skills to develop into what I needed to be able to do, and it paid off for me, and it paid off for what we were able to do. And so, a couple key things, key components in those years that I thought were kind of a big thing was two big things that happened. And I think I wrote them down. In 1996, the OJ interview. So the OJ after the trial, OJ's first interview after the trial was with BET. And that happened through our office. And just a quick little story about what happened there was, I mean, there was death threats, there was bomb threats, because white folks were they just was not having it, right? Black people were like, man, a rich Black person gets off, so it was two different dichotomies of things happening at the same time. So from an internal standpoint, it was really crazy because our production people had to find, I don't know if anyone's said this before, had to find two separate locations. None of the staff knew it. It was just a basic two locations. The VP of production in DC knew the locations. Very few of us on our side knew the locations because we had to, but that was it. And then the VP of production in DC would then decide which of the two locations was actually the hot one, which meant of the two, which one OJ. So they were mimicked locations, fully ready to shoot. The vendors themselves didn't even know who the guests were because we, if they knew who they were, them vendors was right on. They probably shut it down, right? Give all kind of excuses. So they didn't know what it was either. And of those two locations, then the VP, clean that up a little bit. Then the VP of production gave the final call on which of those two. So that was crazy. That was the big event. And then the other thing that happened during my tenure there that was big, before I talk to you about the way we do it, then we'll be out of here, was Bob Johnson did an interview on 60 Minutes. And why was that big? Because I remember it was 60 Minutes, it was CBS, and it would happen on a Sunday. And it's a really good interview. I was watching it, he's talking about him starting up, and Bob lived on a farm with horses. So his daughter was in the equestrian. He was kind of sharing the story about that. Yeah, it's like, president of a company. I mean, I think a ranch isn't a far-fetched entity. I'm thinking, right? So Monday, all hell broke loose. Unions and all kind of people were just in arms because now they're like, who's this Black dude? Where'd he come from? And he's talking about horses and equestrian, and they came. They came to the degree that if I'm ever successful like Bob Johnson is, which I'm going to be, I'm never going to do an interview with 60 Minutes at my home because America's not going to understand it. I'm going to do my interview with 60 Minutes at the office, right? The conference room. I am not sharing that success with America, like my personal success and what I do with it. No, because they can't handle it in America. It was so bad, fam, that we had to move Comic View from California to Georgia. That's how Comic View went on the road. We moved to a right to work state. So we were the first to kind of trigger that whole Georgia thing. Tyler and them are down there in Georgia now, but the Georgia and Black television, that started with us. I mean, BT moving Comic View to Atlanta, Georgia. And I think we did at least 2 seasons there. We did a season in New Orleans. We did a season in Florida, in Miami, Florida. But that Georgia Peach thing, that's how that all started, because we had to move it because they were trying to do all kind of crazy stuff, and it's like, nah, we out. And it's so funny. Now here's from an inside thing. When we moved it, we didn't get any more money for moving it, right? So like the budget for Comic View, whatever that was, now that it's in Atlanta, it was that same budget. And you had to do what you had to do. It's like, that's what your boss is saying do. And so, man, our production team, and again, if I get them to agree to mention their names in some future episodes, I'll mention their names because they get all the credit for it. I just don't want to now until I call them and say, I'm kind of talking about this kind of stuff. But turn a whistle, boom. Our production person, man, she turned it on a dime, professional, got same quality stuff. And we were shooting in Atlanta. And I believe we did 2 seasons in Atlanta. And in that Atlanta, in one of those Atlanta seasons is when Rickey Smiley got to be the host of the show. And Rickey Smiley got to be the host because of my boss who created Comic View. I know there's some stuff out there that says some other VP of music did it. No, not even close. I don't know where that came from. Somebody was trying to get into a club some night. No. Why do I know that? Because I was in the audience. Rickey Smiley came out on the stage as a comedian. He had this routine where he had this big boot on one of his shoes. It was like a huge boot. As if he had a short leg and a long leg. For at least, it seemed like forever, for about at least 3 minutes, people were laughing so hard he couldn't even start his routine. My boss looked at me and was like, offer him the hosting role for the next season of Comic View. Now that's what happened. In Atlanta, my boss who created Comic View, I'm not going to mention his name, but you can put 2 and 2 together. And how do I know? Because I was sitting there when he told me to go backstage and offer Rickey Smiley the hosting job for the next season. The hosting jobs were pretty straightforward and pretty easy. My boss was like, boom, offer them, boom. It wasn't this undercover, none of that stuff. And it was really cool because it also gave me an opportunity to understand a creator of a show. I was fortunate enough to work for a creator of a show who also directed his own show. And I think I mirrored him because second season of The Way We Do It, I created The Way We Do It and I directed the second season of The Way We Do It. So I'm thinking about it. I'm everything that I've been exposed to, and the thing that I brought to that BET table was the financial stuff. But what I then learned how to do is produce and direct, which I'm very grateful for, to be able to pull that off. So that's how Rickey Smiley got, because I just want to mention that one particularly because I hear that rumor out there, and I was like, man, that's a lie. Ain't nobody do that. And so now you guys now know. And if you have someone who doubts that, then have them hit me up, and then we'll split screen, and we can Zoom, and we can have that conversation, right? Because I think that's why it's important for me to share, and I challenge some of our other staff to start to talk about what really happened behind the scenes, so you guys get to understand the business of it and how to things move forward, and just nip all of the nonsense in the bud, and the rationale and the reasonings for stuff. If you guys hit me up and I need to do a part 2 of this, I will, because I'm that's 12 years it's on that board, 1990 to 2002. So I'm kind of giving you like a light mode of some things, but some of those hardcore things that you might have wanted to know, and I know that was a big one. Why we had a white comedian, and how and who picked Rickey Smiley. There was nobody picking those hosts other than the creator of the show, until the creator of the show left BET and they brought Comic View back. The original people that were involved in Comic View are not a part of what Comic View is today. They're not a part of that process. And that's why it's where it is now. Right. So if you want stuff to come back, those of us who are still on this side of the ground, we can make it happen. It's real easy. We can bring back the joy, the stuff. We'll bring back. You can bring back the Comic View that you guys, maybe your parents and your grandparents would kind of tape out. Maybe you can see some old clips, the old stuff that's on YouTube, and bringing back my sketch comedy show. Because I'm looking for now season 3 to bring that back, because the way we did sketches, a lot of people didn't even know we were doing sketch comedy at BET, but we did, and so that's why I have this channel now, so you can see for yourselves. That's why I put up. So if you get a chance, check it out. At TWWW TV, the way we do it. TWWI, the way we DI. Do it TV so the way we do it. So TV, subscribe, check it out. I put up both seasons, clips of them and long form. I apologize, but I can't do the music part of it because music rights are crazy. And what I think too, if you get a chance, check out we did poetry. I think got about 8 to 10 poets. It's called Spoken Revolution. One of our comedians, Shang, hosted it inside of the show, but I cut them out so you could just see the clips of the poets and how we were just doing some trailblazing stuff and how just creative people are, and that was just so cool. We were able to do that in such a short period of time. But so let me just kind of rationale. So getting to the place where we get the word that Viacom is buying BET out of the office. And so my boss said, that's, I think, 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. Viacom, let's see if I can find, give you that date, where Viacom buys. 2000. So this is a clip from ABC News. So Viacom Inc., this is an ABC News clip. Viacom Incorporated's $2.3 billion purchase of Black-owned parent of the nation's biggest cable television channel aimed at Blacks was seen. I love this term, at Blacks, right? Our president uses that, the Blacks. There will not be an African-American ownership at the top. And I think that makes a difference. That was the executive producer of Black-owned broadcaster. So they were kind of having that debate about if this was good or not. So, you can see at the end, I always say dig deep and find out before you make that decision. But yeah, that was done in 2000. So in 2000, the end of 2000, we got notified that Bob sold. And again, you got to talk to Bob about why he sold. You can read the book about it. And now it looks like they're trying to sell it again. So it's kind of funny how things work. But I say that to say that my boss came to me and said, Andre, we got about 2 years before they're going to get to us out here in our Burbank office, because there's a lot of stuff that you got to do when you acquire a company. You acquire it, you got to figure out what they do, and then eventually you put your own people in. I mean, that's just a normal case. I was not upset about knowing that, because once you're acquired, you're acquired. So don't be naive. And folks, if you get acquisition in your worlds, just know that they're going to bring their own people in, because that's what happens, right? So my boss was like, you got about 2 years before they come to you. Is there anything you want to do? And now I'm fresh off of show running, Comic View, doing other projects. I'm just like feeling it. And he said, don't tell me now, just go away, think about it, and come back. And when I went away and thought about it, I said, I'm going to do sketch comedy. And he said, all right. So he said, write it up. He's like, I remember I'm a budget person, so I already kind of know how I need to be able to do it. I knew I couldn't do like a sitcom because that requires writers. The thing that I learned also on Comic View is we were doing like little sketches, and sometimes we're kind of playing around. Our creator was playing around with different kinds of, written material to kind of support and supplement the Comic View. He was trying to expand the reach of it away from just stand up. You'll see some of the stuff like with Miss Laura Hayes on set, and there was like a little set, like a little kitchen kind of thing with Ronaldo Ray, and they had a little banter. So this, when you kind of look at that, it's almost looking like, in those years, it's almost like a set, right? It still wasn't, but some of that stuff was written, and so we had some a key writer come in. So I was starting to understand the written word, but I also understood how expensive writing to have writers come on. And most cable couldn't really afford to do a lot of that. So that's why you had a lot of those reality shows and stuff on cable, because with the money that we had, you were doing music videos and reality shows, which what a lot of cable companies could work with. So I saw these little sketches, and I was like, well, we can't afford like writers to write sitcoms. And Bob was dabbling with doing some television. He had a television. He acquired a book, and they could turn a book series. They could turn it to little films. So when we were helping to adapt that format to work for us, I was involved in understanding that whole process. So I took all that in to then say that I want to do sketch, because to me there was enough written in sketch. Sketch to me was the next progression for a stand-up comedian. And remember, my whole focus was I was so around stand-up comedians that I just understood their talent, and I just thought the industry really wasn't using their talent properly because they really didn't understand who they were. And so my thing was that, in my mind, that one of the ways, and remember, I'm in Living Color. I'm from that era. Saturday Night Live. Once Eddie Murphy left Saturday Night Live, I left, so that wasn't my thing. And even quirky stuff like Hee Haw. There was some other stuff. I don't know if you ever saw Hee Haw, but he also like a country version. But I just like the whole sketch comedy thing. You could just do a whole lot of stuff really quick. You could introduce a lot of stuff without having to be locked into like a certain kind of way of doing things in a scripted format. And I noticed that those who allowed their talent to a little bit looser on their stuff was funnier to me. So I'm like, okay, my goal was, okay, I have all of these comics that have touched Comic View. So there's a pool. Now, what limited my pool was my pool had to be local to California, right? Because they had to be able to get to Burbank. So I could be flying in people. So inside of that pool that was local, there was still a good pool. And I wanted to do it where they drove the sketches. Nah, I wanted to feel more like First Year. Remember First Year in Living Color, where you could see the comedians actually laughing at their own stuff. They're kind of biting their lips because it's so funny that they can't hold back. See, that's what I wanted. When you get talent on the stage, these are hardcore stand-up comedians starting to crack up to each other. Oh man, you're on to something. So that's what I wanted to do. So long story short, so he said, what you want to do? He said, got about 2 years. And that's what I had. 2001, 2002. I'm out there 2003. It's gone. But I have 2 seasons in on a show that I created. And in my second season of the show, I was able to direct it as well. Episode. I think we did about 36 episodes. Second season, I think we did like 8. And it was celebrity episodes. When you look at the site, I have them up there, and I made it diverse as well too. I mean, I have it was Pastor Troy, Lil Flip, Sheena Arnold, Rough Ends. I mean, we had Mac 10. I mean, I had Riddick Parker, the football player. So I wanted it to be a showcase of talent, and I wanted a formula where my comedians could invite someone on, and they have a fun time doing it. Ed McMahon did the show. That's what freaked out a lot of people when I did, and especially in the BET world. I mean, this brother got how folks like that. Well, see, that was the advantage of being in Burbank with BET, because a lot of our white friends, they recognize the swag and they enjoyed themselves when they came. I learned that when we were doing BET Live out here. I was able to get a diverse group of people to show up because, Black folks, we're very inviting in our creativity, and we make you feel welcome and have fun with us. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, you're Black, you're Asian. If you're hanging with us, you hang with us, and you eating what we eating in the green room, and you're keeping it moving. You know what I mean? So that swagger is a valuable thing that we always bring to the table. Everything we touch, we bring it. You see the sports, everything. I remember when they were dogging Obama because he had like a little stroll. He was walking on the side of the White House, and he was strolling. I was like, that's the first president I've ever seen had some swag at the White House. And I'm like, oh man, they ain't not. And then he said, I'm gonna wear a tan suit. Oh, they lost it. So the brother's like, I'm tired of just this blue and red. He came in a tan suit. I was like, I wish he'd have pushed it a little bit further. Like, screw them, man. Go with a double-breasted and some cuffs and just do your thing, right? So that and the intelligence to connect to that, but that wasn't his style. He grew up in Hawaii, so if he was from really from the Chi or from Philly, so it's like, yeah, man, go in there, get your gaiters on, do your thing. You know what I mean? It's like have a little Steve Harvey attitude at the time. You know what I'm saying? That would have been hilarious. So I enjoyed that time at BET from 1990 to 2002, 12 years of my life. But I learned so much, and I want to share this information with you guys because you need to kind of know what's been happening. And we can get this back. As long as I'm on this side of the dirt, it's really easy. We can get this back. You know what I mean? So I'm volunteer, and I'll go get the crew back together, circle the wagons, and bring the magic back again. Because once you understand formats and formulas, then you just reload, right? Let me think about it. Remember Pennsylvania God Family Football? Great coaches, just reload the talent, right? If you some of you guys have come from powerhouse high schools or powerhouse colleges, the reason why they're powerhouses is because they got a format, a formula that works. And then every year that senior quarterback leaves, they just turn the new one, new running backs, they just reload. This is our system. This is how we move. This is how it works. And then that new talent comes in, just like now. It's time for some new stand-up comedians to come into the fold. Just like every era had their comedians, and then the next generation and the next generation. But you need to have the teachers. And this is where I put a little pressure on my comedian friends, my stand-up friends, who have to share with these young people what they really need to do. Yeah, like you got to get on the road. You got to get in front of that mic, right? We got to help them. And if we have any kind of showcases, we might have to go out a little further and grab them to show them how to do it, right? My whole thing now is to take another next generation of writers, producers, directors who do it a little bit more on the entrepreneurial side of the game, and a little bit more on not caring what people think about. Do your culture, do it right, and it'll attract everybody. You don't have to water it down. And if they don't want to do it, then take a little bit more time, do it yourself. And then they'll turn around and come back. There's a reason why Ryan Coogler got that $90 million to do that film. You see what I'm saying? So they weren't, people like, whoa, how did he get all that? Yeah, because they knew. They knew what time it was. So we just need to expand that story. Yes, do our homework. Listen to the people who actually did it. And I'm putting a challenge out to all of us like me who have that experience. We got to dust off them shoes, open up those old books and come back. And for me, I want to come back, show you what to do, and then go fishing. Right. So it's like, I'm not a young man anymore. I'm not supposed to be one. But the knowledge that I have, I want to show you guys how to do it. And then I'm out again. Right. So I'm like that little assassin. I come in, just like that little freelance contract that the VP of production gave me in Burbank. He said 3 months, came in there, boom, show you how to do it. And then I'm out. Right. Because I had that run. Right. And then I'm just going to just do those little passion pieces that I want to do, but show you guys how to take it to the next level, how to recreate what we needed to do before. Because before 1980, there was no concept of a BET. And then it became a reality. And now 45 years later, there's going to be another challenge with it, whether it's called a BET. And to me, it should be more than one that's stepping out there. But we got to train the next group. And how you train them is those of us who know how to do it just have to put ourselves back into the plate of pulling it off. Oh, see, now our sun. Now I need a sun because now it's getting dark. And let me turn on this light. That's the one thing about California. How bad? Oh, there we go. So I just turn a little bit light for you guys. But I'm not closing my window. No, I like the sunlight. So now this is the artificial sun. So we have to, because it got dark there for a second. So that's what we have to do. So we have to make ourselves available again, and make ourselves available by knowing that we exist. Because for a lot of you, you didn't even know we exist, right? They'll tend to work on just the top couple people, and then the people who actually do the work, you don't know we exist and what we did. And we can do it again. That's why I shared with you a lot of this stuff that I know. And I'm just one of several people that I know that I could call right now and put it together so that we could then pass it along, so that we have quality product, quality programming, and training you guys to take it to wherever skill you had. Someone had to go out of their way to show me, because one thing about entertainment business, it's so many different ways to get to it, right? People are like, do you have to go to film school? No. To me, it's like, if you get a chance to go to a film school, and especially if you don't have to pay for it, go for it. Right? But if you got to pay for it, my thing is, go to a school, and that's just my own bias. But if you could minor in that, right? So that minoring in something, like for me, to me, I think just coming to this next generation, we just have to be more entrepreneurial. So everybody's got to have some kind of business skills, business degree. So like me, it's like Bachelor of Business Administration, or say if I had a marketing degree and I could minor in film and television, then that would be a winner, right? Because I can use that basic marketing degree to sell anything, market anything. And then if that was my little passion that I was doing. But film and TV is just that's just a very interesting creature, in the sense that your exposure to it. And to be honest, growing up, I didn't even think of film and television as a career. I just thought of it as something. It's an entertainment vehicle. You watched television and you go to a movie theater. I had no concept of that was actually a profession, and I knew no one in my family or immediate area was in that business. It took me to go to Howard by way of University of Houston, because I didn't go there directly. Went to Houston, back to Howard, and even at Howard, I was at the business school, so I still didn't have a connection with the drama department. I didn't even do that on campus. I didn't make any kind of connection to television until after I graduated, and a friend of mine who was in accounting was at BET. So I always predicated my story with that. I'm not that one. It's like, hey, I always wanted to be Spike. I admired Spike Lee. I enjoyed what he did, and I only knew to support it by going to his movies. That was my way of giving. Still had no idea about that industry, so I'm not even going to share that kind of stuff with you. I just lucked into it. Now you have a little bit more of a taste where you could start your own little YouTube channel. You can learn about television stuff. But if there's no general curiosity or someone doesn't come into your world with it, like how are you going to know? So my suggestion is continue to move forward, experiment, and now that you know that you can do it, put in the work, right? Read the books, check out things like this, ask questions. I'm the kind of person you can hit me up and ask a question, and then next podcast I'll read them and answer them as best I can. You see what my background is, so I'm not like no superhuman. I didn't go to film school. I went with a baccalaureate of business administration, but now I'm a writer director. Looking to bring my sketch comedy show back, and I just wrote a horror movie that I'm going to be I want to shoot in Houston, East Texas, a horror movie, right? So this stuff can be done, and it's all of these diverse kind of things that you have. Those 12 years at BET allowed me a lot of experiences, and I think I might even have a podcast next time. It's gonna be even more shocking than just BT the early years. I might put something out there because the old thing, you don't ask, gotta ask, right? I don't know if your parents ever told you that one. It's like, quiet mouth don't get fed, right? So you gotta ask. If you don't ask, you're not gonna get it. You can always get around a no because no's are plentiful, but you might mess around and get a yes. Right. So just wanted to walk you through some of those years and some of those key things. If there's something else that you might not from a rumor mill, because I'm not in the gossipy world, but I'm definitely into giving you facts from the perspective of what I've seen when I was there. And the unique thing about BT, it was the only television network for Black people, period. And it's different from owning a radio station, and it's different from owning a record label. Those are three distinct, different types of skill sets. And if you want television, and it was funny. I was just talking to a friend that I think I said it in my last podcast that I did some finance work for Byron Allen's HBCU Go, right? The football season. Now, how did I know how to do that? Because I was involved in BET Sports. And I don't know if you guys know, BET Sports was the first one to nationally broadcast HBCU football. And the key people that were a part of HBCU Go that first season had BET Sports experience. Because you can't get that. Where else can you get that? Right? And BET Sports, which is an understanding of Black colleges, and for me, I went to Howard, right? So it's sort of like I saw an interview, and they were thinking about bringing A Different World back, and how the first season of A Different World was so much different than the next season when they brought in Debbie Allen. And I said, I could tell you why the second season of A Different World was different than the first season. Because Debbie Allen went to Howard. And her job as a producer was to show you Black life on a college. And she didn't have to make that up. She just had to close her eyes and remember how she was rolling when she was at Howard. And when you do your truth, it works. You know what I mean? So I was like, as soon as I saw her, and you can say whatever you want about Bill Cosby, but he was smart enough to get Debbie Allen. And when Debbie Allen touched a different world, Hillman became a black college because Debbie Allen closed her eyes and delivered what she experienced. So black college football is no different than HBCU Go football, black comedy, black sketch comedy, black anything. If you're immersed in the culture, all you got to do is just share that with the world. It's one of the freest things that you could do. Doing the way we do it was hilarious. It was fun. I couldn't believe I was getting paid for that. It was fun to do that. Comic View, the same thing. Remember I was saying, work a regular job, 9 to 5, and then go on location, working again till like 2 in the morning, and then going home, and then get up and got to go to work the next day. It's like, how that madness? But when I go into Comic View at the Normandy Casino around comedians was not work to me. And when you're behind and you're backstage, oh my God. It was great. It was great. So that's why I'm like, we got to bring that joy back. And we have to share what I'm going to say this nicely. Those of us who know have to share. And those of us who don't know need to get out the way because you're messing it up. This next generation of talent needs to know the right way. I think I mentioned this to someone before. I'm a film buff, but there's a scene, and maybe I may have said this in my last podcast, but it's apparent, and I'll probably repeat it a couple of times. Just old man Dre, just don't mind me. But there's a scene in Glory, the movie Glory, where the soldiers are shooting the gun and they're just hitting cans, and some are really good shots. And Matthew Broderick's character comes up to the white lieutenant, and tells him to make sure they know how to do it the right way. There's a right way of putting in the powder and shooting a gun. You're supposed to be able to shoot like 3 bullets in a minute or something. Show them the right way. Don't be just playing around, being cool. Show them the right way. So like for me as a producer, I'm going to show you how to do a paper cut. I'm going to show you how to edit. I'm going to show you how to do auditions. When I do my auditions in Houston, I'm doing auditions, or I'm not doing all auditions online, right? For my horror movie, you're going to come in, you're going to read from a script, a cold script reading, meaning that you're going to get the script while you're there, the sides, a couple of pages that I want you to read from the horror movie. There's going to be a little X. There's going to be a camera, a single camera in front of you. You're going to have a mark, and then I'm going to have you read. You're not getting it in advance. You're going to come with headshots. You're not doing any digital stuff. No. You're going to come in with your headshot because that lets me know you're willing to pay for yourself, invest in yourself. You're going to read a cold side, meaning you didn't get it in advance. That's going to tell me if you were doing any training on your own, that you're learning from some kind of coach that's in the Houston area, perfecting your craft. And then those people are going to rise to the top. And then I know about those. When I pick from that talent to be my lead talent in the horror movie, I know that they can do things on the fly. So if I have to rewrite something, I can give it to them. Like, oh, I need more time. No, you ain't got no time. We in the swamps. We got to rewrite this now. We got the alligator out the swamp. And the sun's about to go down, and we can't stay here much longer. So we got to do this now. I need to know that you're able to do that kind of thing. And I don't know any other kind of way to do that than to put you on the spot and you know your craft. And that's what we got to start to do again. Set the bar, show them the right way to do it. And young people, y'all pull it off. I have every confidence when I do my horror movie, I finally get it financed in the Houston area, that all of my talent is somewhere down there now. They just don't know that they stars yet because I ain't got to them yet. I know that they're down there, right? And how I'm going to, and those that are down there now doing the hard work that no one's paying attention to, but their coach is saying, you need to do this. Your trainer, you need to do this. You got to have your headshots. You got to be able to read cold opens. You got to be able to hit a mark. You got to die. And they're like, but for some reason they just know, and they're in Houston and they're like, I don't know what's the next thing. And then here I come, and I'm like, oh my God, there's this audition for this horror movie. And I got to bring a headshot. That eliminates a lot of people that I'm not interested in. Oh, and you got to read sides, and you can't get them in advance. That's going to shed. People going to get scared away. And then those who show up, then that's the ones that just going to get the opportunity, but they put in the work. So we as older people in the game, before we criticize anybody else, we need to do that. And then as far as supporting, Black business and Black things that we need to do, we need to walk through that as well. We need to observe what's happening, be smart about it. I'm not big on judging people other than looking at what they did right, what they did wrong, and reinforce the right things and minimize the wrong things. We're all human. We all have our moments, so, and then just understand what the bigger picture is, that we're taking, rightfully or wrongfully, Black culture is taking a lot of hits in the entertainment world. And to me, we've got to reinforce to our younger people the right path to take. Right? And just the obstacles that are going to happen and the things that you just, I know it's hard. Your dreams sitting right in front of you, and people dangling stuff in front of you, and temptation, and just like, technology is in such a way now, it looks like there's a lot of quick winners for stuff, and, instant gratification and instant money. Well, a lot of that comes with some things, right? And I want you to be aware of that. And hard work is not one of those things that's going to hurt you. And knowing how to do something yourself, it is very refreshing. Now, it might take me longer to write a script than someone else, but I know how to write one. It might take me longer to edit a clip, but I know how to do it. I know it might take me longer to do an audition, but I know how to do an audition. It took me a minute to figure out how to just do this YouTube stuff and then do it in a way that's constructive. Takes a minute, right? But you just quietly do it, and you get it done, and you just keep moving forward. And then for those that I'm putting out the challenge to share what you know, and for those who know that they want to do stuff, there's people that still know how to do it in your own community. And that's why we have to. I was just talking to one of my friends about this now. Excuse me, because my generation tended to be kind of behind the scenes and really didn't want to share a lot of stuff, because that's not how we were built. This thing, being on television, telling you what you did, we just weren't trained to do it that way. You just quietly did the work. Well, we can't do quiet anymore, because that's not helping the Generation Z and the generation out. It's not helping this next generation who needs to go into the arts. It's not helping, because they need to see people who actually did it before, and share with them how you did it. I hate when I watch stuff and they talk, but never give you anything. They never refer you to anything, or just, if you ask a direct question, they never answer that directly. Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? So, at the very beginning of this, I was like, look, folks, write your own checks. You want to keep your money? Write your own checks. You run a business? Make sure you still writing the checks, because then that means that business has to come to you. You stay in control. That one thing, entrepreneurs, that's an entrepreneur 101. Write your own checks. Make sure that information is coming to you. And if you're hiring people, they should not be paying you. You should be paying them. My agent can't pay me. My lawyer can't pay me. I pay them. They work for me. I'm not giving my check to them and they're going to give me back something. What's that, allowance? What are you talking about? I'm not doing that. And with the way we do it, I own that trademark. The sketch comedy show, the way we do it, I own that trademark. It's mine. I own it. So I don't have to ask someone to bring the way we do it back. It took me 10 years to get it, but I got it. 10 years. 10 years. But I got it. That's discipline, right? But look at the value of it at this point, right? So hit me up and look out for my next podcast, because I think this one I might do a little something a little shocking on this next one as well too. But I'm still starting doing that. I do like the sun. So just let me know if that was too shiny before. I like this look, but this is I don't know, half of y'all might be asleep by now. What time is it? 8:30? It's 11:30. Just let me know. This is 8:30. This is good light, but I don't know. What did I start at 6? So just let me know if that's too early. I'll play around with different times, maybe do 7. I know at least at 8 sun's out, but I like having my window open. I don't know. I'm just getting claustrophobic. Just sharing with you guys. All right. So that's the way we do it for tonight. And I will see you guys soon. Peace.